The American West wasn't just gunfights and horses. Between 1850 and 1900, some really strange things happened out there. A doctor made a suitcase out of an outlaw's skin. A thief left poems in the safes he broke into. And there's a lot more crazy history that Hollywood never told. Stick with us to check out 25 true cases that will surprise you. Subscribe to our channel to get more videos like this. Number 1. George Parrott, known as Big Nose, was lynched by a mob in 1881. What happened next is disturbing. Dr. John Osborne received the body and decided to tan the criminal's skin. The process is basically the same as what's used for cowhide. You remove the fat, soak it in tannin to preserve the fibers, and then stretch it out to dry. The difference is that human skin is thinner and has less collagen than bovine leather, so it tears more easily. Osborne turned that skin into shoes and a suitcase. He wore the shoes on the day he became governor of Wyoming. The skull was cut in half and turned into an ashtray. The state's first female doctor used one half as a pencil holder. Osborne also opened Parrott's brain, looking for physical signs that explained why he was a criminal, a popular theory at the time that we now know is absurd. Number 2. John Wesley Hardin claimed to have killed 41 people, a number that, whether true or not, shows something deeper than bravado. It shows a broken mind. Hardin grew up in the chaos of post-Civil War Texas, killing his first man at 15. He spent decades on the run, drinking and shooting. Today, specialists would recognize in him classic signs of PTSD mixed with psychopathic traits: extreme hypervigilance, over-the-top reactions, an inability to feel empathy. Alcohol, his constant companion, only made everything worse because it messes with the exact part of the brain that controls impulses. In 1877, at a hotel in Abilene, he woke up annoyed by snoring in the next room. Without hesitating, he fired through the wall and killed Charles Huger while he slept. This isn't the story of some tough gunman. It's a snapshot of mental illness in a time that didn't have a name for it. Hardin ended up shot in the back in 1895 in a saloon in El Paso. Number 3. Fort Griffin moved more money in a week than a lot of Texas towns saw in a whole year, and almost all of it came from vice. The saloons ran day and night, with poker tables where fortunes changed hands in minutes. Pro gamblers showed up from all over the country, knowing nobody asked questions there. Brothels operated out in the open, some with 10, 15 women working in shifts. It's estimated that each buffalo hunter spent between $50 and $100 a night, money that today would equal more than $1,000. The whiskey was watered down, the cards were often marked, but nobody complained. Complaining in Fort Griffin could cost you your life. John Wesley Hardin and Doc Holliday passed through here, and it wasn't by accident. Where there was easy money, there were dangerous men who wanted their cut. Number 4. A forgotten handkerchief at a crime scene changed everything. In 1883, San Francisco detectives had just one lead, a piece of cloth with a laundry mark. What did they do? They visited 90 laundries in the city, one by one, until they found the owner. That painstaking legwork led straight to Charles Bowles, the legendary Black Bart. English-born, he arrived in the U.S. in 1831 and became Wells Fargo's worst nightmare, holding up 28 stagecoaches. But he wasn't your typical outlaw. He wore a suit, never fired a shot, and left poems in empty safes. That handkerchief marked the birth of data-driven criminal investigation. Sometimes taking down a legendary outlaw doesn't require a shootout, just patience and a good pair of worn-out shoes. Number 5. In the Old West, whiskey was a brutal mix that bartenders called rotgut. The recipe included strychnine, tobacco, pepper, and soap. Strychnine, a rat poison, attacks the nervous system and causes violent muscle spasms in tiny doses. Tobacco dumped nicotine straight into the stomach, causing nausea and dangerously speeding up the heart. Pepper irritated the entire digestive tract, creating a burning feeling that drinkers mistook for strength. Soap was added to create foam, making it look like real fermentation. That combo turned every shot into a chemical Russian roulette. Sellers would toss the liquid into the fire to impress Indians with the flames, proving the brutal alcohol content that earned it the nickname firewater. Number 6. For 60 years, kids played next to something that looked like a dummy in amusement parks and haunted houses. No one imagined it was a real corpse, and worse, a walking arsenic bomb. Elmer McCurdy, a train robber killed in 1911, was embalmed using a common technique at the time, fluids loaded with arsenic. That poison killed the bacteria that would have decomposed the body, turning Elmer into a kind of toxic statue. In 1976, film crew technicians at Pike Amusement Park found out the truth when they moved what they thought was a mannequin. The arms snapped and bones showed up. Forensic analysis found the bullet that killed him and extremely high levels of arsenic in the tissue. Elmer spent decades being displayed, sold, and forgotten until he was finally buried in Oklahoma 66 years after his death. Number 7. Frank James handed his revolver to the governor of Missouri in 1882, weeks after Jesse was assassinated. What happened after that left a lot of people stunned. Even with decades of bank and train robberies with civilians and employees killed, Frank went to trial and walked free. How was that possible? Simple. Local politics. Juries in Missouri were made up of neighbors, many of them sympathetic to ex-Confederates. Witnesses were afraid to testify or just disappeared. Prosecutors faced pressure from influential figures who saw the James brothers as rebel heroes, not as outlaws. Frank lived another 33 years as a free man, working regular jobs until he died peacefully in 1915. Justice in the Old West worked very differently than the books say. Number 8. Here's James Killer Miller, the gunman who figured out a survival trick before the invention of the bulletproof vest. The guy took 4 shots to the chest and stayed on his feet. The secret? A metal plate hidden under his clothes. Now think with me. Black powder bullets back then traveled at about 250 meters per second. Sounds fast, but it's slow compared to modern guns. That homemade plate worked like armor. The lead would hit, deform, and stop right there. But energy doesn't just disappear, right? The impact could still break ribs and cause internal bleeding. Miller could take the hit and keep shooting. The man went to Methodist church every Sunday, didn't drink or smoke. They say he even killed Pat Garrett, the man who took down Billy the Kid. In 1909, the rope finally got what the bullet couldn't. Number 9. Isolated mountains do strange things to the human mind. Charles Kennedy found that out the worst way possible. In 1870, he lived with his Ute wife and their small son in a remote cabin between Elizabethtown and Taos, New Mexico, the perfect place for a predator. Tired travelers stopped there looking for rest. Few made it out alive. Kennedy developed a gruesome system. He welcomed guests, waited for nightfall, and then attacked. Bodies were burned in the fireplace. Their belongings were sold in town. No one suspected the big, bearded man living up in the mountains until his own 5-year-old son broke the silence. In front of a traveler, the boy warned that his father planned to kill him. The child was right, and he paid with his own life for telling the truth. The isolation in the mountains of New Mexico created a monster his own family couldn't stop. Number 10. Take a look at the layout of this inn. It looks simple, but every detail was designed to kill. The benders would seat the guest in a specific chair with their back to a canvas curtain. On the other side, someone waited with a hammer. One hit to the head, the trapdoor opened, and the body dropped straight into the basement, an assembly line. When neighbors finally went in there in 1873, they found 11 bodies buried in the yard. The family had already fled. To this day, no one knows for sure what happened to them. Some say they were lynched. Others say they got away. Katie Bender became almost a legend, with people swearing they saw her in other states for decades. What we do know is this: they turned hospitality into a deadly trap. Number 11. Did you know the military still teaches the same tactic gunfighters used back in the 1870s? Sitting with your back to the wall wasn't paranoia, it was survival. In the Old West, anyone who played cards in saloons learned fast. Your peripheral vision could be the difference between living and dying. Seeing every entrance meant you could spot trouble coming. Wild Bill Hickok knew that rule better than anyone. In August 1876, he walked into the Nuttall and Mann's saloon in Deadwood. That day, his usual seat was taken. He asked to switch. The other player refused. Bill sat with his back to the back door. Jack McCall took advantage. He came in quietly from behind and fired at point-blank range. The legendary gunfighter fell holding his cards, 2 aces and 2 eights. To this day, that hand is called the dead man's hand. Number 12. When Doc Holliday was in jail and facing a heavy sentence, his partner came up with a risky plan. Kate set a nearby barn on fire, creating enough chaos that the guards abandoned their posts. In the middle of the confusion, she freed Holliday, and the two of them rode off into the night. This kind of distraction tactic was common in the Old West, but few women had the guts to pull it off. Kate wasn't just anyone. Born into a wealthy family, she was orphaned early and went through adoption and widowhood and worked as a dancer in Texas. That's where she met Holliday, the gunman who would later fight alongside Wyatt Earp in the OK Corral shootout. Kate became his lover and partner in all kinds of schemes. Her nickname, Big-Nosed Kate, wasn't exactly kind, but she didn't care what people thought. Number 13. Forget the movie look. That bandana over a cowboy's face wasn't style, it was real protection. Working cattle kicked up dust that wrecked your lungs. Fungi in the air caused fever and serious infections. The cloth over the nose and mouth worked like a barrier against all of that. It also protected against the biting cold at dawn. It was basic protective gear, plain and simple. Anyone who ignored it paid the price with respiratory illnesses. Surviving in the West took more than courage. It took taking care of your own health. Number 14. Alice Ivers didn't count cards like they do in modern casinos. Her secret was something else. Pure math. She calculated odds in her head while the men around her drank whiskey and bet blind. Most gamblers back then trusted luck. Alice trusted numbers. She knew exactly the chances of completing a straight or making 3 of a kind. While her opponents played on instinct, she played with a cool head. That's how she won $6,000 in a single night, money that could have bought an entire ranch back then. But in 1910, math didn't save Alice from a deadly fight. She killed a soldier in her own saloon in Colorado. The game ended, and prison began. Number 15. Pearl Hart saw Buffalo Bill perform when she was young and became obsessed with the Old West. She left Canada at 17 and ended up in Arizona, where she met Joe Boot. In 1899, the two of them held up a stagecoach at gunpoint. They took about $400 from the passengers. But here's the interesting part. They got lost in the desert and were caught sleeping by the local sheriff. In court, Pearl played hardball. She claimed she needed the money to visit her sick mother and used the fact that she was a woman to win over the jury. It worked the first time. She was acquitted. But the judge didn't like it and came up with another charge. Sentenced to 5 years, she served only 18 months. Why? The prison wasn't set up for women, and she supposedly got pregnant in there. An embarrassment nobody wanted to look into. Number 16, the Pony Express charged $5 for a half-ounce letter in 1860. Sounds expensive? That was the equivalent of $150 today. Even so, the company lost money on every delivery. The math didn't add up. Keeping 400 horses, 190 stations, and 80 riders cost a fortune. The company burned through $200,000 in 18 months and never managed to turn a profit. Sound familiar? Think Uber or WeWork. Startups that grow fast, dominate headlines, but bleed cash. The Pony Express was the first one. The final blow came in October 1861. The telegraph connected coast to coast. A message that used to take 10 days now got there in minutes. Technology killed the business overnight. The founders went broke. But they created something that became an American legend. Number 17. Why did the Army bet on camels in 1856? The answer is in their bodies. A camel can lose 25% of its body weight in water without collapsing. A horse? It dies at 15%. That happens because camel blood has oval cells that keep circulating even when it's dehydrated, while a horse's blood gets thicker and gums up. Now look at the feet. A camel has a wide pad that spreads its weight on soft sand. A horse sinks with its narrow hoof, burning twice the energy with every step. In the Camp Verde, Texas test, the camels carried 400 kilos for 60 miles without water. The horses needed constant stops. The problem was never performance, it was temperament. They spat, bit, and scared the horses in nearby units. Number 18. What few people know is that governments turned scalps into a kind of currency. It wasn't just wild violence, it was an organized system, with paperwork and everything. Colonial authorities paid bounties for every scalp brought in. There were different price lists for men, women, and children. Hunters handed over the scalps, filled out documents, and got paid in cash. Mexico even offered $100 for an Apache scalp in 1835, a fortune at the time. That drew in Americans, Europeans, and even other indigenous people who got into the business. Some faked Mexican scalps to boost their profits. The system created a gruesome industry that lasted for decades and moved huge amounts of money. Bureaucracy in the service of barbarity. Number 19. Before a storm hits, nature lights up its own warning signal. Out on the Old West plains, cowboys swore they saw their horses and cattle glowing in the dark. It wasn't a haunting. It was St. Elmo's fire. The air got so charged with electricity that it started to glow on the tips of animals' horns and ears. The same thing sailors saw on a ship's masts. Imagine you're riding, your hair standing on end, the smell of ozone in the air, and your horse suddenly looks like it came straight out of hell. Seconds later, the lightning struck. Number 20. That lasso you see in Western movies? It didn't come from English settlers. The technique was born on Spain's cattle ranches and was refined by enslaved Africans who had already worked with herds back in their own continent. The Portuguese and Spanish brought that knowledge to the Americas, and it was black men who mastered the art of open-range herding in Texas. It's estimated that 1 out of every 4 cowboys was black. During the Civil War, white ranchers left for the fighting and left entire ranches in the hands of enslaved people who ran everything on their own. After emancipation, those men already knew the job better than anyone and stayed in the saddle. Number 21. Did you know capturing an outlaw dead took more technique than just pulling the trigger? Early cameras needed up to 30 seconds of exposure, so the body had to be completely still. Photographers used metal frames hidden behind the corpse, kind of like mannequin stands, to keep it upright. Ice was essential, not out of respect, but because swollen bodies became unrecognizable and the reward could be denied. Some bounty hunters carried blocks of ice along with their ammo. The strangest part? A lot of sheriffs preferred those photos over the body itself because they arrived before decomposition and worked as official proof in county records. Number 22. From a structural standpoint, Old West saloons were disasters waiting to happen. Built in a hurry with green lumber that dried out and cracked within weeks, these buildings had zero fire planning. Thin walls, low ceilings, and poor ventilation created a space where heat built up fast. Add kerosene lamps hanging from beams of dried-out wood, and you've got the perfect recipe for tragedy. Most towns didn't have organized fire brigades. When a fire started, it spread in minutes. The famous Long Branch Saloon in Kansas burned to ashes in 1895 for exactly that reason. What you see today at tourist attractions is a rebuild. The original didn't survive its own structure. Number 23. Sitting Bull spent 4 months traveling with Buffalo Bill's show, and what he saw in Europe left him baffled. It wasn't the huge buildings or the machines that caught his attention the most. It was the poverty. He couldn't understand how white people could have so much wealth and still let children beg in the streets. In Lakota culture, the tribe took care of everyone. No one went hungry while others had extra food. He even gave the money he earned to beggars and shoeshine boys, saying white people knew how to make money but didn't know how to share it. To him, a society that abandoned its young had nothing to teach his people. That view helps explain why he left the show and went back to the reservation. Number 24. Here's something that'll surprise you. In California in 1850, there were 9 men for every woman. In other Western towns, the ratio was 3 to 1. Think about that for a second. It was straight-up supply and demand playing out in real time. Women quickly understood the value they had in that market. In saloons, they were hired to sing, dance, and chat with the men. The real goal? Get the guys to spend more on whiskey and beer. The longer a cowboy sat there talking to one of these girls, the more money he left at the bar. And here's the interesting part. A lot of these women weren't prostitutes. They were just playing the hand that scarcity dealt them. Number 25. Geronimo was captured, but never defeated. While the U.S. government kept him as a prisoner, he figured out something few warriors understood. His fame was worth money. Instead of wasting away in captivity, the Apache leader turned his name into a brand. He sold autographed photos, bows, and arrows to the same Americans who had hunted him for decades. He charged for every public appearance. He was an attraction at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair and marched in President Roosevelt's inauguration in 1905. White people paid to see up close the man who had terrified two countries. Geronimo understood the game. If he couldn't win on the battlefield, he'd win in the marketplace. He died in 1909, still a prisoner, but left money for his family, a lesson many business people today still haven't learned.